Hello, everyone. My name is Stacey Ryan-Cornelius. I'm the Global CFO and COO of Geometry. I'm so excited today to welcome our guest today, Greg Edwards from UWG, for a discussion on unleashing better creativity by looking at the market through a unicultural lens. And we're going to get to what that means in a moment, but we're going to delve into how applying diversity, inclusion, and equity to all aspects of business can translate to real growth. Greg is the Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of UWG, formerly Uniworld Group, the longest standing full-service multicultural advertising agency in the United States, celebrating 50 years. I want to say hearty congratulations to the whole team for that. That's an amazing accomplishment. You guys have been pushing forward culture through insight-driven storytelling for all of those years, and it's such an important thing to also note that you are owned or majority owned by a female. So you are a female and minority owned agency led by Monique Nelson as chair and CEO, working with an amazing list of clients. Just to name drop a few, obviously you have Ford Motor Company, Colgate, Palmolive, Unilever, Dove. Happy that both Geometry and UWG have worked on a couple of projects together. So Greg, thank you again for joining me today. Can you tell us a little bit more about your role at UWG?
No, great. Thank you. Thank you for having me today. So basically, my role would be very similar to yours, except I don't have the financial responsibility. So I get to have all the fun without any accountability. But what that means for me on a daily basis is we spend a great deal of our time making sure that we're delivering best-in-class services to our clients. But more importantly, that we're making sure they see that from a diverse perspective, that they are always thinking about these what we call unseen consumer groups and these segments of the marketplace that sometimes go without support. In doing that, we work tirelessly to make sure that there's always a conversation on the idea of uniculture, this idea that as you look at a consumer group, you must look at those groups that you may not consider and the impact those groups might have on your market share.
And uniculture is more than just race, right? So just expand on that a little bit more.
That's a great point. Uniculture is really more about lifestyle. And so what it gets into is, the simple things. If you're a foodie, we all love food, right? We all love certain aspects of food. And the reality is, depending on where you are in this country, you can love a different version of something by a different seasoning. I tell people all the time, if you go to McDonald's in 5 different parts of the country, spread from shore to shore, you'll find that they actually have different ingredient mixes for their barbecue sauce because they have different flavor profiles.
Exactly.
Think of that in the culture. We all have a flavor profile, and we want to have that flavor profile recognized. We want to engage in that flavor profile, and we want that flavor profile to kind of personify who we are as an individual.
Very good. Thank you very much for that additional information for me. So are some brands nowadays, do you think, getting out of sync? Because if you look at the data and the demographics of the data, we have this right now, this insurgence of awareness or additional awareness in corporate America about the realities of culture and different things that have been difficult for certain groups of the world in order to digest in that sense. What can you tell me about how you have been helping or how your clients approach the creative process when you're doing a particular campaign that has a unicultural element to it?
Well, I think the first thing to realize is that there are important components of uniculture that go into campaign development. First, there is the development of an overarching brand strategy that tells us how you want to be seen in the world and how you think consumers should perceive your products, right? Then there's that aspect of why it's important to them. And why, on an individual basis, why it's important to me. So it gets into that conversation of all brands are the same in the sense that they all have some purpose, they all have some meaning. So you've got to be relevant, you have to be available, and you have to be speaking to me in a tone that aligns with my perspective, my belief system.
Right, exactly. So that would mean that you would need a diverse workforce. You need diverse and inclusive client teams in order to be coming up with these great creative ideas in order for that to move forward. It'd be helpful to have diverse supplier partners in order for the whole stream of the campaigns to work through. And obviously that translates into the diversity of thought cultures to spur the innovation that would come up with the great ideas that you're doing for your clients. So if I tapped into UWG's other superpower, which I actually have firsthand experience with, which is helping clients develop sustainable diversity and inclusion business plans. Can you discuss a little bit about that element of your practice and how you work with your clients in that way?
So one of the things that Monique does a tremendous job of on a daily basis is helping our clients and our partners understand that maybe your infrastructure isn't firing on all cylinders. It's one thing to bring us in to work on a project. The question is, how do you work when we're not there? How do you sustain this work? How do you guarantee that you don't find yourself in a situation where you thought it was just casting, or you miscast, right? You put the wrong person in the wrong situation. Or you didn't put the right person in the situation at all. And that starts with making sure that you have a more diverse team internally, right? And what Monique does with the diversity inclusion team is they really do focus on helping our clients understand the challenges they face relative to their staff, and more importantly, their systems. The most important aspect of it all is getting you to listen. That's the challenge, right? It's really never about just the people. It's about listening to the people and hearing what they have to say. If you think about the social injustice that we're going through in America right now, the conversation we're having, it's not as much about what brands can do to help. It's as much about what brands can do to learn. And so I saw a beautiful sign the other day. A young lady put up a sign that said, I'm sorry, I'm late, I had to learn. So the diversity and inclusion team works extensively in that area of helping you understand and helping you learn. And when you learn and take action, it does improve the overall product.
So I can imagine a situation where, and you can tell me, because you've been in the room, there's a great creative idea, and you have a client who believes it's a creative idea, a good creative idea, but just there's a challenge with trying to maybe, get it over the hump. Like, how do you push it through?
So if we are in a room and a client says to us, there's two things that are an immediate red flag for us. I don't connect with this culturally. That's an immediate red flag, right? And you delve a little deeper and say, well, because I'm not a Black person, or I'm not a Latinx person, then we have failed, right? And the reason why we failed is the premise of uniculture actually has nothing to do with ethnicity. The premise of uniculture resides around a brand's meaning and a brand's purpose, and us delivering that purpose and meaning at that moment of truth. But the idea is that we need to first make sure our clients are immersive in the culture, and more importantly, immersive in who might be leading that culture. And so if it's a conversation that says, well, by the way, we sell this product and it does well with 21 to 25-year-olds, and then we turn around and we say, well, guess what? Most of the 21 to 25-year-olds in America now that would be buying that product are actually people of color. And so it's the culture you should be pursuing constantly. And as a result, our job is to make your brand work in that culture. The client should be able to get that part. We try to stay away from the ethnicity conversation.
Right.
We really the conversation of what is the culture trying to achieve. Even in a situation where we have language barriers, right? If we have a situation where our client is running a campaign of Latinx or Asian consumers, the brand doesn't change. The brand remains who the brand is. It's just now putting that language in context and then making that context relevant. And the client needs to understand that relevance. So we do a good job. We're really proud of the job we do. We have a program called Immersion where we bring the clients in, and long before we start doing work for them, we'll spend either 8 hours, 12 hours, or 18 hours with the client's marketing team. And in some cases, they're senior executives from D&I, and we will immerse them in the culture.
One point that came up as you were talking is data. So data and analytics as you're going through both the data of, the audience that you're trying to reach. And then I'm a numbers woman, as I said before, I want to know what the ROI is for my business. How do you help your clients understand the significance of that and give them tools for that understanding?
How we get there is we actually have a tool called the Unicultural Identity Network, which is essentially an 80 million person database that really focuses in on African American, Latinx, Asian Americans, and women. And so it's a pretty comprehensive tool. It's a tool that has been jointly developed with Wonderman, and so we've been able to really go in Wonderman Data and really go in and push that tool to apply it towards our client's business. So the first step in us for creativity is actually data. It comes across in a room that it's an idea or it's a tactic or a program, but we are data driven. And so everything we do first is about aligning on business objectives. We usually like to narrow our clients down to no more than 3 main priorities, right? Because if they ask us to do 7 things, we won't get all 7 right.
Right.
Those, we try to focus in from a data perspective. We talk about either raising share or preference or making sure that we get real tangible touch points with those consumers where they may in fact gather their information. but we're data driven first, and we really do focus in on that. That's a little bit of surprise to most people. They think that most multicultural organizations are simply working on the language barrier or the difference in perspective.
Language, yeah.
Reality is we are actually working in the same space as everyone else. We're just focused in on that population that in many instances gets lost in a bigger environment.
And in terms of the other side of the house, of the practice that you mentioned that Monique leads, primarily where it talks about the diversity and inclusion immersion and the plans that go with the individual corporations, how would you characterize the approach you take to show that has ROI for the business itself? So for clients, you can show them that, they have their sales going up, but, if somebody's trying to convince me, you're not supposed to convince me, but if somebody's trying to say, this will be good for your business, what are some of the data points that you give your clients in that regard in order to help them fully appreciate and understand the significance of it? Because it's a business imperative now.
So ironically, this is a fun point. Our D&I team is staffed like a client service team. So they actually go out and they pull data, the same level of rigor around data around corporations who've made that transition. And when they come and they do a pretty extensive presentation in a generality, and then they go in and they delve into your company in particular. So they take an actual brief into the room and help you build out a brief, and then they go and they find what you're trying to achieve. It's funny, I was on a call recently and a top client said to me, I don't think we have a diversity and inclusion issue. And that's a great starting point. If you do or if you don't is the fact, right? So our D&I team is actually staffed like a traditional client service team with a project manager and also with a research lead that goes in, and then they delve into your business to determine if you do in fact have a D&I issue. But to be candid with you and be honest, most businesses in America have a D&I issue. No one wants to hear that. No one wants to express that. And you have to understand you have a D&I issue because of intersectionality. The world has just changed, right? So you probably are not representing enough people of color. You're not representing, people of Asian origin. You got all these things that you're probably not doing and can do better. The team's job is to quantify for you where those gaps exist. So, and I want to be clear, you don't change that overnight. Those things are plans, they're strategies, right? You say over the next 9 years, I want to have X or Y or Z, and you build that out. But we approach that like we approach client service on the marketing side. We go in and do an assessment of your business, and do an assessment of your organization. We come back and hit you with data points in relative categories or competitors that you're working against, and we show you what they've been able to do and what the bottom line looks like. And it's a straightforward bottom line report. Also, it says that companies who perform like this have a 6 or 8 or 10 or 12 or 40% increase in revenue or volume with these consumers in general. And by the way, these consumers happen to represent 60% of your market share.
There you go. It's all about the numbers. Right now, I'm energized and optimistic that the severity of the moment is going to result in, impactful change for the future. I think we all are. We've seen some news reports already come on about things that, we could have asked for a long time ago, and now that they've come up to pass, and that's really good. I've heard Monique say on several occasions that diversity is being invited to the party and inclusion is being invited to dance. I think our audience would love to know, and I specifically would love to know on a geometry level as we try to build out a proper D&I sort of infrastructure. How do you drive more employee engagement? Because we know that that's going to, unleash all the great creativity and innovation that we're really, really starving to improve as we move along. So, what do you tell your clients about, what do you need to do for employee engagement? Like, what are the common pitfalls that happen that block inclusion if you already believe you have a diverse group of people in your organization?
So ironically, that's a great question. So ironically, here's one of the challenges we usually face is a client that's either an existing client or a new client has a program they want to deliver in the marketplace, right? Which means traditionally we have about 12 weeks to get them on board. So what that means is we actually have a very forthright process to our immersion tool. We come in and we blatantly outline those differences that the client may think exist, right? They may not know why someone is interested in their products, or they may not even care. We go through a process of getting that open dialogue up front and out there. And I'll give you an example of it. We start out with one conversation and we say, if it's the African American or Black community we're working with, we say to our actual client that fried chicken is good. And there's a little level of discomfort with that immediately. Even when I said it to you just now, there's a little, where is he going with this, right? And then we go on to explain that the reason why fried chicken is good is because fried chicken is actually good. It's not just because Black people think it's good. It's because if you've ever had great tasting fried chicken, it's memorable. And oh, by the way, if you go to Korea, they do some incredible fried chicken there also. Then you start to look around and realize that most cultures have a fried chicken product that has a twist to it. And then all of a sudden you realize that, yeah, fried chicken isn't just a Black thing. It's just how racial insensitivity has scoped it and how it's defined it. So we start with that conversation and we say to them that here's some of the things that we have in common. Here are the things that we believe in. So we start with a very forthright conversation around humanity first. And what it does is it actually breaks down a lot of the barriers, because you'll be surprised what clients will share with you when you start a conversation with saying that fried chicken is good. Some clients will be uncomfortable and they'll say, well, that's just a racist thing to say, or that's racially insensitive. Or I've had clients say to me, well, I could never say that. And I look at them and I say, you could surely say that around me. I don't know who you're around that you couldn't say that, because we agree with that preference. But the reality is it's a human conversation first. Right. And that human conversation tends to break down those barriers. And then we try to encapsulate that human conversation into your business objectives. Because then what it does is it makes you understand that there are consumer segments that you may in fact not be talking to, simply because you didn't realize you had a common ground, a commonality between you.
Right. That's actually a good transition to my next question, which comes to talent acquisition and recruitment. So you mentioned, where people recruit, which colleges they go to. And you can maybe get some of the entry level or the junior level talent in, but then once they raise up into the ranks of the organization, then, you have a challenge there. So, hiring at a senior level and hiring at a junior level. What sort of advice does UWG give to your clients about recruiting in particular on both the senior and the junior level?
So we tend to tell our clients to look around your boardroom, look around your consultancy, your consultants in the room, and really mirror and ask yourself, do you mirror a representation of America? Do you have a diverse group, or, do you have women in those key positions? Do you have people of color in those key positions? And we usually come back to them and say, do you even have those people in your organization that you're overlooking? That's usually one of the most important ones, right? Because if you tell someone to go out and start a new hiring principle, practice, or process, they can tell you it'll take them years, and they're not misleading you. That's the truth. But what you tend to find is most people have a really resilient group of individuals in the corporation that for some reason they've just not noticed. And so we get our clients first to start from within, right? Look at who you are and look at who you represent. And then once you start to see that influx of talent from inside the ranks, then you start to see some of these other these perspectives take place. For instance, as you start bringing more people up in your ranks, you find out that you actually have a great pipeline to HBCUs. You start to find this out because, once again, it's humanity. It's people talking about who they are, what they've done, and their circles. And next thing you know, you've got this great pipeline. At the most executive ranks, we try to advise our clients that you're going to need to bring someone in from the outside. The reason why you're going to need to bring someone from the outside is your corporate culture probably prohibits you from making change. And, clients will get a little defensive about that and say, we make change all the time. No, you change products sometimes. You don't, and by the way, you don't do that so rapidly, right? I mean, the reality is, it's taken, we just recently today, with time stamping this, in the last 2 days, Aunt Jemima said they would change their packaging and change their name, right? And I don't know if you remember this, but 15 years or so, they actually took the bandana off her head and gave her a perm. In this day and age, that would be also wrong, because now people of color are in the natural hair. So it's a whole litany of things that you never listen, right? But to get there, the company had to change. The people in the corporation had to change, and someone had to stand up one day and say, it's just an injustice. It's an injustice because we never really thought that someone else was being hurt by this. So we ask companies to reflect upon their internal staff first. And then at those higher levels, we do say, look, you're going to have to bring someone in from the outside, because quite frankly, your system needs to be questioned. Then the most important piece I think to understand is you're going to be uncomfortable. You're simply going to be uncomfortable. and you've got to be uncomfortable. You've got to be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Uncomfortable. Good saying.
There's some people who say that every decision they make, there's always a seventh person in the room, and that person is always the most radical, and they never align with anyone on any side, right? And what we're simply saying to you is, take a moment and listen to that person. There's going to be something that they're saying that could transform you as an organization to make you more culturally diverse and more culturally accepting.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. One of the things that came to mind as you were talking was also when we're talking about bringing people from the outside and sort of making sure that the people that you do have in your organization have a chance to flourish, and that their creativity gets up to the point. One of the things that I learned in working with your teams is that sometimes it's that middle management level even that kind of blocks that. So tell me a little bit more about that, because that was a revelation to me. You always hear that, it has to be leadership, and that's very, very true. Leaders have to set a tone and they have to push through certain things, but how our organizations work or how they work. So how is it that middle management layer somehow is the blocker? Tell me the challenges with that.
It's ironic you say that, because actually in the middle layer, it's really driven by the fact that it's just more work and people don't want to do more work. It's not this highly complex thing. It's not. The reality is that at some point I do want to go home, and I don't want to have to sit here all day. And you know what? It'd be great if I took a moment to deal with that. But the reality is I really want to get home, and I want to be with my family like you want to be with your family. And we've been doing it this way, and it just works easier for us that way. You have to be able to have that conversation, that this one little thing, and it's really interesting too. In the middle management level, once again, like I told you, we approach clients. Don't give them a multitask of things to do. Don't say there's 7 things you need to achieve this year to be successful in being a more diverse thinker, a more diverse leader. Focus them on 1 or 2 key things that they can actually do and deliver results on. And in the middle management, that's important, because that's that mindset that says, I want to get something done.
Right.
And it's okay. And by the way, let's be clear. In this day and age, coming out of this lockdown with COVID-19 and everything we're going through, it's okay to want to get home, right? We've all learned a whole new thing now about our lives, and there's a lot of validity to getting home. But it's also incumbent upon senior leaders to be very direct with the task and the ask, and also have a very stringent set of outcomes that you're looking for that can be achieved. You can't ask someone to transformationally change the company in general. You have to ask for little things. You think about the conversation around casting. The first change in casting is getting a different casting director, hiring different production facilities and producers and directors, all those things, right? But you can't do all that at one time. You have to take steps in that process. So in the middle management level, ask middle managers to achieve 1 or 2 things that they can control in a reasonable amount of time. And if you do that, you'd be surprised with the success and the pull-through rate. And we do that at Uniworld with our team. We really do try to keep them focused on 3 things every year to do. Clearly, we don't have as much of a diversity issue at Uniworld. Uniworld, if you look at our ranks, we look like the UN. It's everybody here. And by the way, that's intentional, right? 50 years of building that out, right? So we practice that and we preach it, and it's really interesting. But even within our ranks, giving the middle management team the ability to achieve success is really, really important for us.
That's great. That's great. So your point of view, obviously, we've all seen everything that's been going on. Are we truly witnessing a further awakening of corporate America for true change in terms of our industry in particular? What are your thoughts?
So, it's funny. And, I told you earlier, I apologize. I was on a client call. And so for the last, I'd say 3 weeks, every call I have is asking that question, right? And I'm being asked that by clients. I'm being asked that by our partners. And, I'm an African-American male in this industry, right? And our industry hasn't always been the best for me, in terms of it's had its challenges, right? What's different now, which is why I believe this is transformational change and change is here, is now people are actually listening. And they're asking to hear things that in the past they may not have wanted to hear, things that they were uncomfortable with. They're listening and they're understanding. If you look at what's happening now, they're saying that Black people have a right to be happy. And that's not ever been a construct of those things. You know, you guys have an office there in Chicago. I'm from Chicago. One of the things that's funny is most people don't realize this. I grew up in what's now called Inglewood. So I am from 63rd and Woodlawn in Chicago. And I went to CVS on 87th Street and played football there. You know, we're one of the best high school football teams in the country. And I get to go away to college and stuff like that. That one occurrence changes my life, and it puts me on a different trajectory to be able to come in and now do something that very few people of color can actually say they do. It's working in advertising and marketing. But now what's different is people want to hear the real stories. They want to understand the humanity of it. They want to talk to people about what's happening in their lives. And then more importantly, they want to become allies in that process. And that allyship is important because the allyship says, I believe you have a right to exist. I believe you have a right to be happy. And I'm willing to stand up and take and be noticed for saying that. And that's a tremendous change. And I got to tell you, I've never seen this happen like this.
Yeah, you and me both. And it's very, very encouraging. Absolutely. I mean, I think it's a turning point in our history, most definitely. And I know 50 years from now, when we're celebrating the 100th anniversary of UWG, we're going to look at this as a turning point in everything and a changing of the landscape of our industry, the same way that your founder changed the scene back when he started the company back in 1969. Greg, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so pleased that you spent the time. Where can our audience find you, either on social media or whatever?
So I'm on all the UWG sites, obviously. Actually, ironically, even in the industry I am, personally, I don't do anything on social media, simply because by the time I do get home, I'm so inundated from what I've seen on social media all day. But I'm on all the UWG sites. I'm actually an active participant with AIM, and you know, I come across in all those channels and things of that nature. So, but you know, everything UWG related, I'm there to be found.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. And thank you to our wonderful audience for joining us on this journey. We're all here to reimagine everything that can happen with our industry and our clients and unlock all the additional creativity that's going to happen from a more diverse, inclusive, and equity-based world. Thank you very much.
Thank you.